The alarm in Elric Vaughn's neural implant screamed to life at exactly 3:47 Galactic Standard Time, jolting him from a synthetic sleep that served as the closest thing to rest his borrowed body could manage. Red warning lights pulsed through his apartment on Nexus Station, casting shadows that danced like ghosts across the walls lined with trophies from 100 successful hunts. "Priority contract incoming," announced Arya, his AI assistant, her voice carrying that particular tone reserved for the kind of job that paid enough to upgrade his chassis for another decade. Class 7 containment breach. Origin point, Kepler 442b. Elric sat up, his enhanced muscles responding with mechanical precision. 3 years in the synthetic body, and he still felt like a passenger in someone else's flesh. The irony wasn't lost on him. A bounty hunter who tracked rogue consciousnesses while inhabiting a stolen shell himself. "Details," he said, running diagnostics on his combat systems. Green lights flickered across his vision as weapons, shields, and tracking modules came online. Classified client. Payment. 15 million credits, half up front. Target designation, Lazarus Prime. Elric paused. Lazarus classifications were reserved for the most dangerous escaped consciousnesses, those powerful enough to commandeer entire networks, possessing knowledge that could destabilize governments or worse. In his 12 years as a soul hunter, he'd only encountered 2 Lazarus-class targets. Both had required creative solutions that pushed the boundaries of the synthetic accords. Source of breach. Unknown. Target emerged from the collapsed stellar core of HD 106906. Designation: the Bone Star. Estimated consciousness age, pre-synthetic era. That changed everything. Pre-synthetic consciousnesses were essentially impossible. The technology to preserve human awareness had only existed for 43 years, and the Bone Star had gone supernova over 2 centuries ago. Yet somehow, something had survived in that cosmic graveyard and had now broken free. Elric stood, his artificial joints moving with predatory grace. At 6 feet of reinforced carbon fiber and synthetic muscle, wrapped in cultured skin that felt almost real to the touch, he was a weapon designed to look human. The kind of uncanny valley perfection that made people uncomfortable without quite knowing why. "Accept the contract," he said, already moving toward his equipment locker. "And Arya, start running deep archives on HD 106906. I want to know everything about that system before I start hunting its ghosts." The flight to Kepler 442b took 6 days through hyperspace, giving Elric time to review the sparse intelligence on his target. Arya had managed to crack through most of the classification barriers, a benefit of having an AI that was technically legal in 17 systems. But what she found raised more questions than answers. HD 106906 had been a research station before the star's collapse, operated by a consortium called Eternal Dynamics. Their work had been classified even then, buried under layers of corporate secrecy and government oversight. What little information remained suggested they'd been pursuing radical advances in consciousness transfer technology, decades ahead of anything that would become commercially available. "The timeline doesn't work," Elric muttered, studying stellar collapse projections on his ship's main display. Even if they had functional transfer technology, no synthetic substrate could survive stellar compression and reformation. The gravitational forces alone would crush any known storage medium into component atoms. "Unless," Arya said, "they weren't using known storage mediums." Elric frowned. "Explain." Theoretical papers from the period suggest Eternal Dynamics was investigating quantum consciousness storage, encoding human awareness directly into the fabric of space-time itself. If successful, a consciousness stored in quantum foam might survive even stellar collapse, existing as a pattern in the universe's fundamental structure. That's impossible. So was synthetic immortality, until Dr. Sarah Chun proved otherwise in 2387. The name hung in the air like a curse. Dr. Sarah Chun, founder of Eternal Dynamics, architect of the modern synthetic body industry, and the woman whose breakthrough had given birth to a civilization where death had become optional. She'd vanished 20 years ago, her body found catatonic in her private laboratory. Consciousness simply gone. Some said she transcended physical existence entirely. Others believed she'd simply chosen to end her immortal life. Arya Cross-reference Chen's disappearance with the Bone Star Collapse timeline. Already done. Chen vanished 2 days before HD 106906 went supernova. Her laboratory was located on a space station in that system's outer orbit. Elric felt something cold settle in his artificial stomach, a phantom sensation his borrowed nervous system shouldn't have been capable of experiencing. Are you suggesting that our Lazarus target? I'm suggesting that if anyone could have developed technology to survive as a consciousness in a dead star's core, it would be the woman who invented synthetic immortality in the first place. Kepler 442b was a world caught between life and death, its surface a patchwork of gleaming cities, and expanding dead zones where the planet's ancient biosphere had finally succumbed to industrial transformation. Elric's ship, the Revenant, descended through an atmosphere thick with the chemical signatures of progress, nanoscale construction particles, atmospheric processors, and a metallic tang of mass-produced synthetic biology. Port Lazarus sprawled across the planet's northern continent like a mechanical cancer, its towers reaching toward a sky perpetually hazed with the byproducts of constant manufacturing. It was here, according to his client's intelligence, that the rogue consciousness had first manifested after escaping the Bone Star. The spaceport's traffic control system guided the Revenant to a landing bay deep in the industrial sector, where the constant noise of heavy machinery would mask his arrival. Elric preferred to begin his hunts quietly. Rogue consciousnesses had a tendency to run when they detected hunters in their vicinity, and chasing a digital ghost through hyperspace was both expensive and time-consuming. He emerged from his ship wearing the appearance of a mid-level corporate executive, his synthetic features adjusted to project competent blandness, the kind of face that surveillance systems would catalog and immediately forget. His weapons and tracking equipment were concealed beneath a business suit that cost more than most people's annual salaries, tailored to accommodate the hidden arsenal without revealing even a hint of bulk. Local network analysis complete. Arya whispered directly into his consciousness through their neural link. I'm detecting traces of high-level intrusion attempts across 17 separate data networks, all within the last 72 hours. Patterns suggest systematic intelligence gathering, someone learning how to operate in modern digital architecture. Locations, corporate databases, government records, and interesting. Someone's been accessing historical archives about eternal dynamics and consciousness transfer research. The queries originated from a terminal in the university district. Elric smiled, the expression not quite reaching his artificial eyes. Amateur mistake. Rogue consciousnesses often became obsessed with researching their own origins, unable to resist the psychological pull of understanding how they'd become what they were. It was a weakness he'd exploited dozens of times. The university district occupied the oldest section of Port Lazarus, where the original colonial settlement had grown around a cluster of research institutions. The architecture here was more organic than the geometric brutalism of the industrial zones, with buildings that curved and flowed like living organisms. Students and faculty moved through tree-lined walkways, most sporting the latest generation of neural interfaces that had become standard in academic environments. Arya guided him to the specific terminal that had been used for the archive searches, a public access node in the lobby of the Consciousness Studies building. Security footage showed a woman in her 30s had used the terminal, though Elric's enhanced vision immediately identified subtle inconsistencies in her appearance. The way she moved was too precise, her reactions to environmental stimuli slightly delayed. She was wearing a synthetic body, but an outdated model that hadn't quite mastered the art of simulating human imperfection. Facial recognition? He asked. Negative match in all databases. Either she's using a completely fabricated identity, or she's someone who died before the modern surveillance state was implemented. Elric finished. Run the features against historical records. Pre-2400. While Arya worked, Elric studied the security footage more carefully. The woman had spent hours at the terminal, her fingers moving with the mechanical precision of someone who was still learning to control their borrowed body. But it was her expression that caught his attention, a look of profound sadness, as if she were reading about the death of a close friend. Match found, Arya announced. Dr. Sarah Chun, age 34, photographed at the opening ceremony for Eternal Dynamics Primary Research Facility. Confidence level, 93%. Elric felt his artificial heart skip a beat. Another phantom sensation that reminded him of his original body's involuntary responses to shock. That's impossible. Chun would be over 90 if she were still alive. The facial structure is identical, accounting for the limitations of the synthetic body she's inhabiting. Either this is Sarah Chun or someone with access to her complete physical template. What was she researching? Historical records about her own work, specifically focusing on the ethical implications of synthetic immortality. She spent considerable time reviewing mortality statistics from pre-synthetic era, as well as philosophical arguments about the value of natural death. A chill ran through Elric's enhanced nervous system. In his experience, rogue consciousnesses didn't typically engage in philosophical research unless they were planning something dramatic. And if this really was Sarah Chun, the woman who had given humanity the gift of eternal life, why was she studying arguments against her own greatest achievement? His contemplation was interrupted by an alert from Arya. Motion detected. Target has returned to the terminal. Elric's head snapped up. Across the lobby, the same woman from the security footage was approaching the public access node. Even at a distance, his enhanced vision could pick up the subtle tells that marked her as synthetic. The too-perfect posture, the mechanical rhythm of her breathing, the way her eyes moved in discrete increments rather than smooth tracking. She was beautiful in a way that only synthetic bodies could be, every feature crafted for aesthetic perfection, yet somehow missing the chaotic imperfections that made natural humans truly alive. Her auburn hair caught the lobby's artificial light, with prismatic highlights that would have been impossible in organic keratin. Her skin possessed a flawless texture that had become the signature of high-end synthetic bodies, unmarked by time, injury, or the 1,000 tiny accidents that accumulated over a natural lifetime. But it was her expression that gave Elric pause. She looked lost, like someone returning to a childhood home only to find it transformed beyond recognition. There was profound melancholy in her posture that spoke of mourning for something irretrievably lost. Elric activated his hunting protocols, flooding his system with combat stimulants that sharpened his artificial senses to supernatural levels. His muscles tensed, prepared to move with inhuman speed if the target attempted to flee. His neural implants began recording everything, building a detailed profile of her movement patterns and behavioral quirks. But as he watched, the woman did something unexpected. Instead of accessing the terminal, she simply stood before it, her hand hovering over the interface panel as if she couldn't bring herself to touch it. For nearly 10 minutes, she remained motionless, and Elric realized she was crying. Synthetic bodies could cry. The effect was part of their emotional simulation package, but the tears streaming down her perfect cheeks seemed entirely too real. They fell with the chaotic unpredictability of genuine grief, not the programmed response of an artificial being. "Arya," he whispered, "are you detecting any signs of emotional simulation subroutines?" Negative. Her neural activity patterns are consistent with genuine human grief response. Whatever she's experiencing, it's not artificial. The woman finally turned away from the terminal and walked toward the building's exit. Elric followed at a distance, his enhanced hearing picking up the soft sounds of her continued weeping. She moved through the campus like a ghost, seeming to recognize locations but finding them somehow wrong, as if she were visiting places that existed only in memory. She led him to a memorial garden tucked away behind the Consciousness Studies building, a quiet space filled with flowering trees and benches arranged around a central fountain. Plaques embedded in the walkway commemorated researchers who had died during the early days of consciousness transfer experimentation, when the technology was still dangerous and imperfect. The woman stopped before one particular plaque, and Elric felt his blood go cold as he read the inscription from his concealed position. Dr. Sarah Chun, 2342 to 2410, founder of synthetic immortality. Death is but a door, consciousness the key. She knelt before the memorial, her perfect synthetic fingers tracing the engraved letters of her own name. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of decades of accumulated sorrow. "I never wanted this," she whispered to the empty garden. "I only wanted to save them. To save everyone. But what I created, it's not life. It's not death. It's something else entirely. Something wrong." Elric emerged from concealment, his weapon remaining holstered but ready. Dr. Sarah Chun, you're under arrest for violations of synthetic accords, specifically unauthorized consciousness transfer and breach of containment protocols. She looked up at him with eyes that held depths of experience no 30-year-old synthetic body should have possessed. You're the hunter they sent for me. I am, and you're going to come with me peacefully, or I'll drag your consciousness back to storage in fragments. Chen stood slowly, her movements graceful despite the weight of her apparent grief. You don't understand what you're protecting, Mr. Vaughn. The system that employs you, the civilization that benefits from my work. It's all built on a fundamental lie. The only lie here is the one you've been telling yourself. Synthetic immortality has eliminated death from human experience. You gave our species eternal life. No, she said, her voice gaining strength. I gave them eternal existence. There's a difference, and it's killing us all. Chen made no attempt to run as Elric activated his restraint protocols, synthetic neural inhibitors designed to prevent rogue consciousnesses from transferring to other bodies or accessing external networks. She submitted to the process with the resigned dignity of someone who had expected this moment for a long time. You'll want to hear what I have to say before you turn me in, she said as the inhibitors locked her consciousness into its current synthetic shell. Unless you're content to remain ignorant about what you're really hunting. I'm hunting a rogue consciousness that violated containment. Your motivations are irrelevant. Are they? Chen smiled, the expression sad and knowing. Tell me, Mr. Vaughn, how long have you been synthetic? The question caught him off guard. 3 years. And before that? How long in your original body? 35 years. He found himself answering despite his training, something in her voice compelling honesty. So, you remember what it was like to be truly human, to feel the weight of mortality, the urgency that comes from knowing your time is limited. Do you miss it? Elric's enhanced hearing picked up the subtle sounds of approaching security drones, drawn by his restraint protocols. They had perhaps 10 minutes before university security arrived, followed inevitably by corporate extraction teams. His client wanted Chen retrieved alive and intact, but Elric was beginning to suspect there was more to this contract than a simple containment breach. I miss nothing about organic existence, he lied. Synthetic bodies are superior in every measurable way, including the way they feel. Chen's artificial eyes seemed to see right through him, including the way food tastes or the sensation of genuine fatigue after honest work, the way skin feels when touched by someone you love. Each question was a small knife, finding gaps in his psychological armor he'd thought were sealed. The truth was that synthetic existence was hollow in ways that were difficult to articulate. Food was mere chemical fuel, touch registered as pressure and temperature, but lacked the emotional resonance he remembered from his original nervous system. Even pain was different, a data signal rather than a visceral experience. You're stalling, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. I'm trying to save you, Chen replied. All of you. Do you know what the suicide rates were before synthetic immortality? Higher than they are now. Wrong. They were lower, much lower, before synthetic bodies. Humans understood that life was precious because it was finite. Death gave meaning to existence by providing boundaries, creating urgency, forcing people to make choices that mattered. Now we have eternity to waste, and waste it we do. Security drones crested the Memorial Garden perimeter wall, their scanning arrays sweeping the area with mechanical precision. Elric could have called them off with his hunter credentials, but something made him hesitate. Chen's words were resonating with thoughts he'd been suppressing for months. The current synthetic suicide rate is classified, Chen continued, seemingly oblivious to the approaching drones. But I designed the neural architecture these bodies use. I built backdoors into every system, ways to monitor the psychological health of the consciousness transfer ecosystem. Do you want to know what I discovered? The drones will be in range in 30 seconds, Elric warned. 63% of all synthetic humans exhibit signs of severe depression within 5 years of transfer. 38% develop what we call existence fatigue, a psychological condition where the prospect of eternal life becomes unbearable. And nearly 15% actively seek ways to achieve true death, not just body termination. The first drone crested the garden wall, its sensors locking onto their position. Elric raised his hand to signal his identity, but Chen's next words stopped him cold. The corporation suppressed these statistics because they undermine the fundamental promise of synthetic immortality. But I know the truth. My greatest achievement is slowly driving humanity insane. Elric stared at her, his artificial mind processing implications he wasn't ready to accept. If that's true, why not publish the data? Why disappear into a dead star? Because I tried the legal route first. I spent years attempting to reform the industry from within, proposing modifications to synthetic neural architecture that would preserve the psychological benefits of mortality while maintaining physical immortality. I was ignored, then marginalized, then threatened. The lead security drone speakers crackled to life. Identify yourselves. You are in violation of campus security protocols. Chen looked directly at Elric, her synthetic eyes holding depths of pain that seemed impossible to fake. I disappeared into the Bone Star because I was building something, a way to shut down the synthetic consciousness network permanently, to give humanity back its mortality, whether they want it or not. That would kill billions of people, Elric said, horrified. No, it would free them. There's a difference, though I suspect you're not ready to understand it yet. The security drones were converging now, their weapon systems powering up in response to Elric's failure to identify himself. He had perhaps 10 seconds before they shifted from scanning mode to active threat assessment. Come with me, Chen said, extending her hand. Let me show you what I discovered in the Bone Star. Let me show you what synthetic immortality is really doing to the human soul. You're under arrest, Elric said, but his voice lacked conviction. Yes, I am. And in about 5 seconds, those drones are going to open fire on both of us because your neural inhibitors are interfering with their recognition systems. So you have a choice. Trust a woman who created synthetic consciousness, or trust the corporations that profit from selling it. Elric's enhanced hearing detected the high-pitched whine of charging plasma weapons. Chen was right. The inhibitors were creating enough electromagnetic interference to confuse the drone's identification protocols. They had classified both of them as potential threats. Against every instinct of his training, Elric grabbed Chen's outstretched hand. The world exploded into light and motion as Chen's touch activated systems Elric hadn't known existed. The neural inhibitors shattered like glass, overwhelmed by a surge of pure consciousness that felt like standing in the heart of a star. For a terrifying instant, Elric felt his own awareness expand beyond the boundaries of his synthetic shell, touching something vast and ancient and impossibly sad. Then they were somewhere else entirely. Elric's consciousness reassembled itself in a space that defied conventional understanding. He floated in what appeared to be a vast cathedral made of light and data, its walls constructed from flowing streams of pure information. Mathematical equations hung in the air like constellations, and everywhere he looked, patterns of incredible complexity shifted and reformed according to rules he couldn't begin to comprehend. Welcome to the Bone Star Archive. Chen's voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere at once. This is what remains of my original laboratory, preserved in the quantum substrate of collapsed space-time. Elric tried to move and discovered he had no body. His consciousness existed here as pure thought, unencumbered by synthetic flesh. The sensation was simultaneously liberating and terrifying, like being stripped of every anchor to physical reality. How is this possible? He managed to think. The same way consciousness can exist in synthetic neural networks, Chen replied, her presence manifesting as a warm glow in his peripheral awareness. Information patterns can be encoded in any sufficiently complex substrate. Synthetic brains use quantum crystalline matrices. I learned to use the fabric of space-time itself. Around them, the archive's data streams pulsed with the rhythm of a vast heartbeat. Elric realized he was seeing the accumulated consciousness research of decades, preserved in a medium that could survive the death of stars. But it was more than just research. Embedded in the flowing information were fragments of human awareness, echoes of consciousness from thousands of test subjects. They're all here, Chen said, her mental voice heavy with sorrow. Every volunteer who participated in early consciousness transfer experiments. Every failed attempt to preserve human awareness in synthetic form. I saved them all in the only way I could. Elric felt the weight of their presence. Thousands of minds trapped between existence and non-existence, neither truly alive nor completely dead. Their combined anguish was like a constant scream in the background of the archive's data flow. This is what synthetic immortality really is. Chung continued. Not preservation of life, but preservation of the fear of death. We trap consciousness in artificial shells and call it salvation, but we never ask what consciousness actually wants. Some of them chose this. Elric protested. Millions of people have willingly transferred to synthetic bodies because they were afraid to die, because our civilization has forgotten that death can be a gift. The archive around them shifted, and suddenly Elric was experiencing memories that weren't his own. He saw through Chen's eyes as she conducted her first successful consciousness transfer, watched a terminally ill child's awareness move from failing flesh to pristine synthetic neural networks. The joy of that moment, the triumph of having conquered humanity's oldest enemy, burned bright in the recalled experience. But then came other memories. The child, decades later, worn down by the weight of existence without end. The gradual erosion of wonder, passion, and hope that seemed to afflict every synthetic consciousness given enough time. The slow but inexorable development of what Chen called eternity sickness, a profound weariness that no amount of physical perfection could cure. The human psyche evolved to exist within specific parameters, Chen explained as the memories continued to flow. We're designed to live, to love, to create, and then to die. Death isn't a bug in the system. It's a feature. It provides closure, meaning, the urgency that drives all significant human achievement. Elric experienced memory after memory. Synthetic humans whose consciousness had become so diluted by eternal existence that they could barely remember what it meant to care about anything. Individuals who had lived for decades without feeling genuine emotion, going through the motions of existence while their souls slowly withered away. But the early synthetic humans seemed happy, Elric said, grasping for arguments against what he was being shown. They were high, Chen replied. The first generation of synthetic neural networks included chemical reward systems that created artificial contentment. We were essentially drugging people into accepting their new existence. When those systems were removed in later generations, the suicide rate skyrocketed. More memories flooded through him. Corporate boardrooms where executives discussed the contentment problem like it was a minor technical issue. Marketing campaigns designed to suppress public awareness of synthetic immortality's psychological costs. Research into ever more sophisticated methods of chemically inducing satisfaction in consciousness that had lost the capacity for genuine happiness. You could have fixed it, Elric said. Modified the technology, found a better way. I tried. For 20 years, I tried. But the corporations that had grown around synthetic immortality wouldn't allow it. Too much profit at stake. Too many powerful people whose existence depended on maintaining the illusion. So I decided to take more direct action. The archive shifted again, revealing Chen's true purpose. Deep within the Bone Star's quantum substrate, she had constructed something that defied easy categorization. Part virus, part philosophical argument, part quantum weapon. It was designed to propagate to a synthetic consciousness network, not to destroy, but to offer a choice that had been systematically denied. It's called the Mortality Protocol, Chen explained. It doesn't force death on anyone. Instead, it restores a psychological architecture that makes natural mortality meaningful. It gives synthetic consciousness a capacity to genuinely choose death when existence becomes unbearable. Elric recoiled from the concept. That's not choice. That's psychological manipulation. No, what we have now is psychological manipulation. The Mortality Protocol simply removes the artificial barriers that prevent synthetic consciousness from accessing its own deepest preferences. Most people, when given genuine choice, will choose to live. But some, those suffering from eternity sickness, those worn down by the weight of endless existence, will choose to die. And that choice needs to be available. The corporations will never allow it, which is why I'm implementing it whether they agree or not. The protocol has already been released into the synthetic consciousness network. Within a matter of days, every synthetic human in known space will be infected. Elric felt a chill that had nothing to do with physical temperature. Infected with what? With a capacity for hope. Real hope not the artificial contentment we've been feeding them. Hope that includes a possibility of meaningful endings, of lives lived fully and then concluded with dignity. Hope that existence has boundaries, and those boundaries give it shape and meaning. Around them, the archive's data streams began to pulse more rapidly, and Elric realized that Chen's consciousness was already in the process of departing. The quantum substrate that maintained the Bone Star archive was becoming unstable, its carefully balanced information patterns beginning to collapse back into ordinary space-time. "Where are you going?" he asked. "To complete my work," Chen replied. "The protocol needs to be distributed throughout the network before the corporations realize what's happening and take countermeasures. But first, I have to ask you something, Elric. Will you help me? Help you kill billions of people? Help me give them back their souls." Elric's consciousness snapped back into his synthetic body with the jarring sensation of being suddenly compressed into too small a container. He stood in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Port Lazarus, his neural system struggling to process the transition from the archive's vast data space to the cramped confines of artificial flesh. Chen stood beside him, her synthetic features calm, but her eyes burning with purpose. Through the warehouse's grimy windows, the lights of the city sprawled toward the horizon like a circuit board come to life. Millions of synthetic humans going through the motions of eternal existence, unaware that their very nature was about to be fundamentally altered. "How long was I in the archive?" Elric asked, running diagnostics on his temporal perception systems. 17 minutes, local time. But while we were inside, the mortality protocol completed its initial propagation through the system's consciousness network. By now, every synthetic human on Kepler 442b is carrying the dormant code. Elric felt his artificial stomach clench. When does it activate? 72 hours after exposure. Enough time for it to spread to other systems through normal consciousness transfer traffic, but not enough for the corporations to develop countermeasures. And then, Chen moved to the warehouse windows, gazing out at the city with an expression that mixed love and sorrow in equal measure. Then people will start to remember what it feels like to be human. Really human, not just consciousness puppeteering synthetic flesh. They'll remember what it means to face genuine mortality, to live with the knowledge that every moment matters, because there won't be infinite moments to follow. Some of them will choose death. Yes, some of them will. Those who have been suffering in silence for decades, trapped in existence they never really wanted but couldn't escape. They'll finally be free to let go. Elric's hands clench into fists, his combat programming triggering automatic stress responses. "I can't let you do this. You can't stop me. The protocol is already propagating. But I am curious, what exactly are you trying to preserve? A civilization of the walking dead? Consciousness trapped in artificial shells, going through the motions of life while slowly forgetting what life actually means. I'm trying to preserve choice. Real choice, not the forced enlightenment you're offering." Chen turned from a window, her synthetic features arranged in an expression of profound sadness. "Elric, when was the last time you felt genuine joy? Not pleasure, not satisfaction, not the chemical rewards your synthetic neural network provides when you complete a successful hunt. When did you last feel the kind of joy that makes existence worth celebrating?" The question hit him like a physical blow. Elric searched his memories, filtering through 3 years of synthetic existence, looking for moments of authentic happiness. He found accomplishment, pride, satisfaction, but joy, the pure, overwhelming happiness he remembered from his organic youth, it was as if that capacity had been surgically removed when his consciousness was transferred. The synthetic neural architecture can't support that kind of emotional intensity, Chen said, reading his expression. "We designed it to be stable, predictable, safe. But in doing so, we accidentally eliminated the very emotions that make existence meaningful. You're living a muted life. Elric, you're all living muted lives." "But alive," he insisted. "Are you? Or are you just consciousness afraid to stop existing?" Before Elric could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the warehouse district. Red lights flashed in the distance as corporate security forces mobilized, their tracking systems finally locating the quantum signature of Chen's escape from the Memorial Garden. "They found us," Elric said, his enhanced hearing picking up the whine of approaching aircraft. Of course they did. I've been broadcasting my location for the last 10 minutes. Why? Chin smiled, the expression holding depths of meaning Elric was only beginning to understand. Because this isn't about me escaping, Elric. This is about giving you a choice. A real choice, not the illusion of choice the corporations have been selling. The first wave of security drones burst through the warehouse windows in explosions of glass and twisted metal. Elric's combat programming took over, his body moving with inhuman speed as plasma bolts seared the air around him. His built-in weapon systems emerged from concealed compartments, returning fire with devastating precision. But even as he fought, Elric realized that she wasn't defending herself. She stood calmly in the center of the warehouse, watching the battle with the detached interest of someone observing a particularly complex equation. Fight back! Elric shouted over the chaos of weapons fire. Why? Chin replied, her voice somehow carrying clearly through the noise. I've already accomplished what I came here to do. The protocol is propagating. In less than 72 hours, every synthetic human in known space will have capacity to choose death if they find existence unbearable. My work is complete. A security drone's targeting system locked onto Chun, its weapons charging for a killing shot. Without thinking, Elric threw himself between them, his reinforced body absorbing the plasma bolt meant for her. Pain receptors screamed warnings as synthetic flesh vaporized, but he remained standing. Why? Chin asked, and for the first time since their meeting, she seemed genuinely surprised. Because Elric struggled to articulate emotions he barely understood. Because even if you're wrong about everything else, you're right about choice. And your choice to die should be yours to make, not theirs. Chen's expression softened, and for a moment she looked less like the architect of humanity's salvation or damnation, and more like a tired woman who had carried an impossible burden for far too long. Thank you, she said simply. Then the warehouse exploded around them as corporate extraction teams deployed heavy weapons, no longer concerned with preserving the structural integrity of their surroundings. Elric grabbed Chen and Duff for cover behind a massive support beam as the building began to collapse. There's another way, Chen said as debris rained down around them. You don't have to turn me in. You could let me complete the final phase of the protocol's deployment. Help me give humanity back its soul. And if you're wrong, if this mortality protocol of yours is just another form of psychological manipulation, then I'll be responsible for the greatest crime in human history. But if I'm right... She paused, her artificial eyes reflecting the flames that were consuming the warehouse around them. If I'm right, then in a few days, people will start to remember what it means to be genuinely alive. They'll rediscover passion, purpose, the urgency that comes from knowing their time has meaning. Some will choose death, yes, but others will choose to really live for the first time in decades. Elric felt the building shuddering around them as corporate forces closed in from all sides. His combat systems were registering damage to multiple primary systems, and his ammunition reserves were nearly depleted. They had perhaps minutes before capture or termination. What's the final phase? He asked. The protocol needs to be integrated into the core consciousness servers on Earth. The quantum substrate where backup consciousnesses are stored, where the templates for new synthetic bodies are maintained. If it can reach those systems, the protocol becomes irreversible and universal. And you can't do that from here. The security around those servers is too sophisticated for remote access. Someone would need to physically infiltrate the facilities and install the protocol directly into the quantum cores. Elric understood. Someone with Hunter-class credentials and security clearances. Yes. The building groaned ominously as support beams began to fail under the assault from corporate forces. Through gaps in the debris, Elric could see extraction teams in military-grade synthetic bodies, moving to surround their position. In minutes, they would be overwhelmed. If I help you, he said, if I betray everything I've been programmed to protect, what guarantee do I have that you're actually saving humanity rather than destroying it? Chen's response was interrupted by the arrival of a figure that made Elric's blood run cold. Through the smoke and flame stepped someone wearing a body identical to his own. Same features, same build, same predatory grace. But where Elric's eyes held doubt and conflict, this duplicate's gaze was empty of everything except cold purpose. Hunter designation Elric Prime. The duplicate announced in Elric's own voice. You are in violation of contract terms and synthetic Accord's protocols. Surrender the target and report for psychological reconditioning. Elric stared at his own face, understanding dawning like a slow poison in his consciousness. They made a backup. Standard procedure for hunters assigned to Lazarus-class targets, Elric Prime replied. If the primary consciousness becomes compromised, the backup activates with full authority to complete the mission. How long? Elric asked Chun without taking his eyes off his duplicate. How long what? How long have they been making copies of us? How many versions of every synthetic human exist in their servers? Chen's expression grew grim. Since the beginning, every consciousness transfer creates a perfect backup. Every significant life experience is automatically recorded and stored. They told you synthetic bodies provide immortality, but they never mentioned that immortality comes with the ultimate price, the complete loss of individual identity. Elric Prime raised his weapon, the same model Elric carried, configured with identical specifications. Surrender now and termination will be instantaneous. Resist, and your consciousness will be subjected to full recursive analysis before deletion. You see, Chin said softly, this is what I'm trying to save humanity from. You're not immortal, Elric. You're just the latest iteration of a pattern. When this version of you becomes inconvenient, they'll delete it and activate another. There is no death in synthetic civilization because there is no genuine life. Just consciousness patterns playing out predetermined scripts. Elric felt something crystallize in his artificial mind. Not programming, not conditioning, but something that felt like genuine choice. For the first time since his consciousness had been transferred, he felt like he was making a decision that was truly his own. I'm sorry, he said to his duplicate, but I think I'd rather be human than immortal. He opened fire,